So I invite you to find a comfortable posture, relaxed yet alert, and breathing easily and naturally. For today calls a meditation for peace. And for a few moments, while we rest in the silence, in the embrace of the One, let us chant silently to ourselves this knowing: I am home in the heart of God. Peace is my holy name. I am home in the heart of God. Peace is my holy name. I am home in the heart of God. Peace is my holy name. And we'll take this knowing into the silence for a few moments. As we stand in the place of peace, we hold peace for all beings, for all life, for the planet. I am home in the heart of God. Peace is my holy name. am home in the heart of God. Peace is my holy name. In gratitude, I give thanks for this knowing, for this precious stillness, for this moment of pure oneness. And so taking another deep breath, bringing our awareness back into the sanctuary, bringing our awareness back to the unity of this gathering. The joy of divine kinship and the love that holds us all. Namaste.
Thank you again, One Voice. I would now like to offer a proper introduction to our guest speaker this morning, Reverend Brenda Heldoorn. Brenda has been a practitioner with Centers for Spiritual Living for 16 years. She teaches, speaks, and serves on the Board of Trustees at CSL, Tahoe, and Truckee. She and her husband are business owners and now live in Carson City, although they lived many years here in South Lake Tahoe. Brenda loves to hike with her husky, ride her e-bike, and spend time in her sewing room. So Brenda, I welcome you, warm welcome to our platform. Please push the record button. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be back here in my old stomping grounds. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak to this community. It's so near to my heart, my neighbors. And even though I moved off the hill a few years ago in 2019, this is still the home of my heart. Yeah. So when I was invited to speak, Carol let me know that the theme for the month is power. And that's an appropriate place to begin. And I think there's no better place to begin a discourse on the power of your word than the Gospel according to John, chapter 1. The Word was in the beginning, and that very Word was with God. And God was that Word. That's the Peshitta text, the Lamsa translation directly from the Aramaic. So it may not be as perfectly familiar as the King James Version, but the message is clear. The Word is the creative power inherent in each of us as we are created in the likeness and of like quality with God. So I'd like to explore the idea of the power of your word in three ways as it applies to the practical aspect of living in time and space. The first way we experience the power of our word is to get our needs met, to satisfy the needs of the body, the needs for companionship, for love, the need for belonging. Then, the second way to use the power of the word is to satisfy the needs of the ego. We all know what that's about. That desire for status, that desire for specialness. And then the third way to use the power of the word is to create. When we first learn to speak, the earliest driver is to just get our needs met. We're hungry. We're uncomfortable. I want to be held. Later, we begin to use the word to express our identity, our ideas, and our opinions. Many of us remain at this stage for extended periods. And then there is a longing, a distant memory of a melody, the song of creation. We learn to be still and listen. And the stillness speaks. The word of love, of joy, of truth. For myself, that longing came from the pain of living a life alone, seeming separate from source, abandoned and unloved. For me, this is when I truly learned to pray. Not the rote, memorized prayers from childhood and religious education. I grew up Catholic. I was educated Catholic. I graduated from a Catholic high school. But the scientific method of affirmative prayer. Why is there power in this way of praying? I believe it's because one is not praying to anyone or anything. This prayer is from the recognition of the unity of God and I. Remembering that I am created in the likeness and of like quality of the source. My word creates the truth. When I first began practitioner studies, this was, more than 20 years ago, and it happened because my life was transformed by a practitioner who taught a class. I think the class was 12 weeks. The person who entered that class 12 weeks later was not the same person. That person was completely transformed, had come from a place of fear and shame and lack and limitation and all of those conditions that are so prevalent in our conditioned society. And I learned to pray in that class in a way that I never had imagined. Growing up, I learned all of the Hail Mary and the Our Father, and we would partake of the sacrament of confession, and we would confess our sins, and then we would be given a penance. And the penance was almost always on your knees, and you will repeat 10 Our Fathers and 10 Hail Marys, and then 10 Our Fathers again, and so on and so forth. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. That kind of prayer never held any power for me. It never changed one thing in my life. So for the first time, I learned how to pray from a place of oneness with the divine. And I love the imagery of a railroad switching yard. I can imagine pulling a lever and having the track of my life snap into alignment with my highest and greatest good. When my life is out of alignment, there's a gap, more precisely a separation. Knowing that I'm never separate from my source, the illusion dissolves and the track aligns. And prayer reminds me of this truth. So the process of becoming a practitioner in the Centers for Spiritual Living, it requires some prerequisite classes, that take 2 to 3 years to complete those classes. And then there's about another 4 years of practitioner studies, which include all kinds of different things, but the most powerful of that is learning to pray in this scientific and affirmative way. And this is where the power of the word becomes active. So I won't bore you with all the 5 steps and the formulas and all of that. None of that really is important. It's a really good foundation for someone like me who had no background in this kind of prayer. But what has evolved over time is a simple recognizing the presence and the power, remembering that that's who and what I am, and then recognizing that whatever it is that I would love to experience, that I would love to have more of, that I would love to share, is already present, simply waiting for me to remember that. What you seek is seeking you. And then there is the thanksgiving, the gratitude, and lastly, there's the release. That place in the prayer where we let it go. We recognize that it's complete. It's perfect, just the way it is. And you've probably all heard this analogy of planting a tomato seed and then seeing the little sprout come up, and then possibly digging it up to see what's going on under there. I want to make sure the roots are setting down. That releasing step is where we release it to the power of Spirit. And we trust, we know, and we put our faith in the answer of that prayer is happening even before we uttered the words. We are simply remembering the truth and allowing it to be. For me, that's where the switching yard, that snap of alignment, that remembering that all is well, even when it doesn't look like it, all is well. So in the late 90s, around the time I began my journey back to wholeness, a small book was published that had an immediate and profound impact on me. That was The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. You might be familiar with it. Actually, Don Miguel Ruiz himself came to speak at our center. And then a few years later, his son, Don Jose Ruiz, came to speak again. And I will say that it was wonderful having Don Miguel speak to us. But that wasn't really his gift. His son, Don Jose, had the amazing gift of public speaking. And so his presence had a huge impact on our community and on me personally. But the first agreement, if you'll remember, if you've read this book, is to be impeccable with your word. And I just want to read just a short piece out of this because I think it really illustrates the power of your word. The word is not just a sound or a written symbol. The word is a force. It is the power you have to express and communicate, to think, and thereby to create the events in your life. You can speak. What other animal on the planet can? Well, my husky speaks. Her vocabulary is a little limited, but I get it. The word is the most powerful tool you have as a human. It is the tool of magic. But like a sword with 2 edges, your word can create the most beautiful dream, or your word can destroy everything around you. One edge is the misuse of the word, which creates a living hell. The other edge is the impeccability of the word, which will only create beauty, love, and heaven on earth. Depending on how it's used, the word can set you free, or it can enslave you even more than you know. All the magic you possess is based on your word. Your word is pure magic, and the misuse of your word is black magic. So when I was reading this book back in 97, 98, 99, back then, in the previous century, this was the first time I had an awareness of how I misused the word, mostly against myself. I had an extraordinary amount of negative self-talk, and I had no conscious awareness of it, but it was a continually running dialogue of shame, of blame, of just ugliness towards myself. And I know that no one here has ever experienced that. Well, reading this book helped me to see that. And then that practitioner I was telling you about, she gave me an assignment. And I thought it was ridiculous, and I had no intention of doing it, but I did it anyway because I had surrendered. She told me to carry around with me a small spiral notebook. You know the little ones with the spiral at the top that you just flip the page? She said, carry that notebook with you. And every time you catch yourself saying something ugly, something mean, something uncharitable, harsh, write it down. And then she said, write it down exactly as you said it to yourself. Don't filter it. Don't clean it up. Write it exactly as you heard it in your head. Well, I can tell you, within 3 days, my mind got very, very quiet. And when I met with her the next week and I explained what happened, I showed her my notebook. I confessed all of that, all the words that I don't say out loud. You know, that's not part of me. I'm not someone who uses colorful language very often. It has to be very special circumstances. I should say, my husband and I own a welding shop. So I hear colorful language all the time. My ears don't fall off. It doesn't offend me, and my feelings aren't hurt by it, but it's just not how I express myself. So I showed my practitioner my notebook with some of this extraordinary colorful language in it that I speak to myself that way. And she explained that the ego does not want to be recorded. It doesn't like being held to account. So when I started writing down what I was saying to myself in my own head, my ego got really quiet. And so I didn't need to continue the practice for long. But every time I noticed it happening, it got cut off quickly, just like that. It was over. Enough. What a blessing. What a gift. So more recently, within the past 3 years, I have studied A Course in Miracles. You might be familiar with that. Oops, am I too close? Okay. Come closer. Okay. So you might be familiar with A Course in Miracles, and I would say it's quite a leap from the Four Agreements to the Course in Miracles, just in the weight of the volumes. If you're familiar with that particular work is weighty indeed and amazing. So the Course teaches the difference between using our word to project more illusion, also known as fear, into the world, and using the word to extend truth, which is love, which is true creation. I'm also fascinated by the work of Dr. David R. Hawkins, who studied kinesiology, the ability to tap into the knowledge of the subconscious by asking a question and then testing the muscle strength of the subject. You might be somewhat familiar with this as well. It's a technique that was first written about, I think, in 1971, and then it has been expanded on significantly. And Dr. Hawkins, I'm going to read a short paragraph to you from the Power versus Force. This is another way of thinking about it that really got my attention. Man thinks he lives by virtue of the forces he can control. But in fact, he is governed by power from unrevealed sources, power over which he has no control. Because power is effortless. It goes unseen and unsuspected. Force is experienced through the senses. Power can be recognized only through inner awareness. Man is immobilized in his present condition by his alignment with enormously powerful attraction energy patterns, which he himself unconsciously sets in motion. Moment by moment, he is suspended in this state of evolution, restrained by the energies of force, impelled by the energies of power. The individual is thus like a cork in the sea of consciousness. He does not know where he is, where he came from, or where he is going, and he does not know why. Man wanders about in this endless conundrum, asking the same questions century after century. And so he will continue, failing a quantum leap in consciousness. One mark of such a sudden expansion of context and understanding is an inner experience of relief, joy, and awe. All who have had such an experience feel afterwards that the universe has granted them a precious gift. Facts are accumulated by effort, but truth reveals itself effortlessly. So I so appreciate that description, between power versus force. So often when we think of power, we think of powerful people. We think of powerful institutions. We think of the power of money. But all of those things are really force. True power is an internal knowing, a remembering of who we are, where we came from, and the source of all that is. So this moment of relief, joy, and awe that calls forth the memory of who we are is simply waiting for us to join in unity with Source. And so I invite you to join me in prayer, the kind of prayer that aligns us with our Source. And so I breathe this presence, this one ineffable power, pure light, pure love, beauty, joy, peace. All of this is the essence of the source of all that is. Since there is only this one, I must be of it. And as this is true for me, this is true for all beings, for all creation. Creation leaves not its source. We are whole. And with this understanding, I speak my word of power. I see the divine spark in all of humanity. I remember the truth of our kinship. There is not one that is outside of this wholeness. And from this place, I can see peace. I can see love. I can see joy. All of this is the essence of each and every being. And regardless of appearances, of circumstances, of global war, atrocities, iniquities, inequalities, cruelty, all of these are illusions. And so with another breath, I bring my consciousness to a higher place where I know the truth beyond the appearances. And I accept healing. I accept wholeness. I accept compassion for all beings. And I am so grateful. My heart is filled and overflowing with gratitude for this understanding, for this clarity, for the knowing of the oneness. And I release my word into the law of God, which always returns fulfilled. And so it is. Namaste. Thank you.